everyone, I am Kristen K. B. Alcover.
My name is Lizelle Marie Panatsol.
And my name is Anna May Amigable.
And today, we are going to report the topic Erikson's Psychosocial Theory of Development. But before we proceed, let us know first who developed the Psychosocial Theory of Development. Erikson first published his 8th stage of human development in his 1950 book entitled Childhood and Society. His full name is Erik Salamansen. He is a German developmental psychologist born on June 15, 1902 at Frankfurt, Main, Germany, and died on May 12, 1994 at Harwich, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Erikson's stages of psychosocial development is a very relevant, highly regarded, and a meaningful theory. Life is a continuous process involving learning and trials which help us to grow. Erikson's enlightening theory guides us and helps us to tell us why. Now, let's start with the introduction to the 8 stages. Erikson's psychosocial term is derived from the 2 source words, namely psychological from the root word psycho, relating to the mind, brain, and personality, and also the word social, relating to external relationships and environment. Both are at the heart of Erikson's theory. Occasionally, you'll see the term extended to biopsychosocial, in which bio refers to life as in biological. The next one is Erikson's theory was largely influenced by Sigmund Freud, but Erikson extended the theory and incorporated cultural and social aspects into Freud's biological and sexually oriented theory. It is also interesting to see how his ideas develop over time, perhaps aided by his own journey through the psychosocial crisis stages model that underpinned his work. Like other influential theories, Erikson's model is simple and well designed. The theory is a basis for broad and complex discussion and analysis of personality and behavior. Also, for understanding and for facilitating personal development of self and others. It can help the teacher becoming more knowledgeable and at the same time understanding the various environmental factors that affect his own students and his personality and behavior. In the 5th one, it stated that Erikson's 8 stages theory is tremendously powerful model. It is very accessible and obviously relevant to modern life from several different perspectives for understanding and explaining how personality and behavior develops in people. As such, Erikson's theory is useful for teaching, parenting, self-awareness, managing and coaching, dealing with conflict, and generally for understanding self and others. Various terms are used to describe Erikson's model. For example, Erikson's biopsychosocial, from the root word bio that refers to biological, which in this context means life. Erikson's human development cycle or life cycle and variations of this. All refer to the same 8 stages psychosocial theory, it being Erikson's most distinct work and remarkable model. The epigenetic principle. As Burr explains, this principle says that we develop through a predetermined unfolding of our personalities in 8 stages. Our progress through each stage is in part determined by our success or lack of success in all the previous stages. A little like the unfolding of a rosebud. Each petal opens up at a certain time in a certain order, which nature through its genetic has determined. If we interfere in the natural order of development by pulling a petal forward prematurely or out of order, we ruin the development of the entire flower. Erikson's theory delved into how personality was formed and believed that the earlier stages serves as a foundation of the later stages. The theory highlighted the influence of one's environment, particularly on how earlier experiences gradually build upon the next and result into one's personality. Each stage involves a psychosocial crisis of two opposing emotional forces. A helpful term used by Erikson for these opposing forces is contrary dispositions. Each crisis stage relates to a corresponding life stage and its inherent challenges. Erikson used the word syntonic for the first listed positive disposition in each crisis and the word dystonic for the second listed negative disposition. To signify the opposing or conflicting relationship between each pair of forces or dispositions, Erikson connected them with the word versus. If a stage is manageable, we can carry away a certain virtue or psychosocial strength which will help us through the rest of the stages of our lives. Successfully passing through each crisis involves achieving a healthy ratio or balance between the two opposing dispositions that represent each crisis. On the other hand, if we don't do so well, we may develop maladaptation and malignancies, as well as endanger all our future development. A malignancy is the worst of the two. It involves too little of the positive and too much of the negative aspect of the test, such as a person who can trust others. A maladaptation, on the other hand, is not quite as bad and involves too much of the positive and too little of the negative, such as a person who trusts too much. The crisis stages are not simply defined steps. Elements tend to overlap and mingle from one stage to the next and to the preceding stages. It's a broad framework and concept, not a mathematical formula which replicates precisely across all people and situations. Erikson was keen to point out that the transition between stages is overlapping. Crisis stages connect with each other like interlaced fingers, not like a series of neatly stocked boxes. People don't suddenly wake up one morning and be in a new life stage. Changes don't happen in regimented, clear-cut steps. Changes are graduated, mixed together, and organic. Lastly, Erikson also emphasized the significance of mutuality and generativity in his theory. The terms are linked. Mutuality reflects the effect of generations on each other, especially among families and particularly between parents and children and grandchildren. Everyone potentially affects everyone else's experiences as they pass through the different crisis stages. On the other hand, generativity actually a need disposition within one of the crisis stages. It reflects the significant relationship between adults and the best interest of children one's own children, and in a way everyone else's children, the next generation, and all the following generations. Now you are ready to go over to the 8 stages. Let's take a look first at the table of Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. On the first column are the approximate ages, on the second column are the psychosocial crisis and test, and on the third column are the virtues developed. And all of this will be discussed later. Stage 1. Trust versus mistrust. Psychosocial crisis. The first stage, infancy, is approximately the first year or year and a half of life. The crisis is trust versus mistrust. The goal is to develop trust with without completely eliminating the capacity of mistrust. Trust is a firm belief in reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. On the other hand, mistrust is the state of being suspicious or the lack of trust. If the primary caregivers, like parents, can give the baby a sense of familiarity, consistency, and continuity, then the baby will develop the feeling that the world is a safe place to be, that people are reliable and loving. But if the parents are unreliable, inadequate, if they reject the infant or harm it, of other interests cause both parents to turn away from the infant's needs to satisfy their own needs instead, then the infant will develop mistrust. He or she will be apprehensive and suspicious around people, maladaptation, or malignancy. Please understand that this doesn't mean that the parents have to be perfect. In fact, parents who are overly protective of the child, who are there the minute comes out, will lead that child into maladaptive tendency, which Erikson calls sensory maladjustment. This means overly trusting, even gullible. This person cannot believe anyone would mean them harm and will use all the defenses at their command to find an explanation or excuse for the person who did him wrong. Worse, of course, if the child whose balance is tipped away over on the mistrust side, they will develop the malignant tendency of withdrawal, characterized by depression, paranoia, and possibly psychosis. Virtue. If the proper balance is achieved, the child will develop the virtue of hope, the strong belief that even when things are not going well, they will work out well in the end. One of the signs that a child is doing well in the first stage is when the child is not overly upset by the need to wait a moment for the satisfaction of his or her need. Mom or dad doesn't have to be perfect. I trust them enough to believe that if they can be here immediately, they will be here soon. Things may be tough now, but they will work out. This is the same ability that in later life get us through disappointment in love, our career, and many other domains of life. Stage 2. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Psychosocial crisis. The second stage is early childhood, from about 18 months to 3 or 4 years old. The task is to achieve a degree of autonomy while minimizing shame and doubt. If mom and dad or caregiver permit the child, now a toddler, to explore and manipulate his or her environment, the child will develop a sense of autonomy or independence. The parents should not discourage the child, but neither should they push. A balance is required. People often advise new parents to be firm but tolerant at this stage, and the advice is good. This way, the child will develop both self-control and self-esteem, maladaptation or malignancy. Nevertheless, a little shame and doubt is not only inevitable but beneficial. Without it, you will develop the maladaptive tendency Erikson calls impulsiveness, a sort of shameless willfulness that leads you in later childhood and even adulthood to jump into things without proper consideration of your abilities. Worse, of course, is too much shame and doubt, which leads to malignancy Erikson calls compulsiveness. The compulsive person feels as if their entire being rides on everything they do, and so everything must be done perfectly. Following all the rules precisely keeps you from mistakes, and mistakes must be avoided at all costs. Many of you know how it feels to always be ashamed and always doubt yourself. A little more patience and tolerance with your own children may help them avoid your path, and give yourself a little slack too. Virtue. If you get the proper positive balance of autonomy and shame and doubt, you will develop the virtue of willpower or determination. One of the most admirable and frustrating things about 2 and 3 years old is their determination. Can do is their motto. If we can preserve that can-do attitude with appropriate modesty to balance it, we are much better off as adults.
Stage 3. Childhood stage, from 3 or 4 to 5 or 6. The task is to learn initiative without too much guilt. Initiative means a positive response to the world's challenges, taking on responsibilities, and etc. Parents can encourage children to try out their ideas, fantasy, curiosity, and imagination. The child is now capable of imagining a future situation that isn't reality right now. Initiative is the attempt to make that on reality a reality. If the children can imagine the future and plan for it, they are responsible. If the 2-year-old flushes my watch down the toilet, we can assume there were no evil intention. But if the 5-year-old does the same thing, then she should know or she is aware what's going on to her. She can begin to feel guilty as well. The capacity for moral judgment has arrived. Erikson, a Freudian, includes the Oedipal experience in this stage. The Oedipal crisis involves the reluctance of child feels relinquishing his or her closeness to the opposite sex parent. The parent has the responsibility to encourage the child to grow, and you're not buddy anymore. But if it's done too harshly, the child learns to feel guilty about his or her feelings. Maladaptation or malignancy. Too much initiative and too little guilt means maladaptive tendency. Erikson called it ruthlessness. To be ruthless is to be without mercy. The ruthless person takes the initiative alright. They have plans, but it's just that they don't care who they step on to achieve their goals. Goals are only matter, and mercy are only sign for weakness. The extreme ruthlessness is sociopathy. Harder person is the malignancy of too much guilt, which Erikson called inhibition. Inhibited person will not try things, nothing ventured and nothing to feel guilty about. They fear that it is fails or they will be blamed. Virtue. A good balance leads to psychosocial strength of purpose, as something many people crave for in their lives. Many people do not realize their purpose through imagination and initiative. I think an even better word for this virtue would have been courage, the capacity of action despite a clear understanding of your limitation and past failings. Stage 4. It is the school stage when the child is from about 6 to 12. The task is to develop a capacity for industry while avoiding an excessive sense of interiority. Children must tame of imagination and dedicate themselves to education and learning social skill. Parents, teachers, and peers are joining each other to help the children. Parents must encourage, teacher must care, peers must accept. They all contribute to make the children learn their pleasure, not only conceiving plan. Children must learn feeling of success, whether it's school, playground, academic, or social. A good way to tell the difference between a child in the 3rd stage and in the 4th stage is the way they play games. 4-year-old may love games, but they only value understanding the rules. It may change it during the game, unlike it, or finish the game by throwing pieces of their opponent. A 7-year-old, on the other hand, is dedicated to the rules considered pretty much sacred. It's more likely to get upset if the game is not allowed. If that child is allowed too little success because of harsh teacher or rejecting peers, Erikson mentioned racism and sexism are other forms of discrimination. Maladaptation or malignancy, too much industry leads to the maladaptive tendency called narrow virtuosity. We can observe this on children who aren't allowed to be children. Parents or teacher keep pushing without allowing the development of broader interests. This or kids without their life, child actors, athletes, and etc. We all admire their industry, but look little closer, it all stands of the way of an empty life. Virtue, a happier thing to develop the right balance of industry and interiority that most industry with just a touch of interiority to keep us sensibly humble, then we have the virtue called competency. Stage 5 is adolescence, beginning with poverty and ending around 18 or 20-year-old. The task during adolescence is to achieve ego identity and avoid role confusion. Ego identity knowing who you are and how we fit into the rest of society. We should learn about life and mold it into unified self-image, one that your community finds meaningful. There are a number of things that make it easier. First, we should have a mainstream adult culture that is worthy of the adolescent respect or with good adult rules model. Further, society should provide clear rites of passage, rituals, and accomplishment to have distinguished the adult from the child. In primitive and traditional society, an adolescent boy may be asked to leave the village for a period of time to live on his own, seek an inspirational vision. In the other way, the distinction between the powerless but irresponsible time of childhood and the powerful and responsible time of childhood is made clear. Adolescent confronted by role confusion, Erikson say he or she suffering from an identified crisis. One of Erikson's suggestions for adolescents in our society is the psychosocial minotrium. He suggests you take a little time out. We tend to want to get to success as fast as possible, and yet few of us have ever taken the time figure out what success means to us. Maladaptation or malignancy, there is such thing as too much ego identity where a person is so involved in particular role in a particular society that there is no room left for tolerance. Erikson called this maladaptive tendency of fanaticism. A fanatic belief his way is the only way. Adolescents known for idealism. Those people will gather around them, promote beliefs and lifestyle. Erikson referred to the malignant tendency here as repudiation. To repudiate is to reject. Some adolescents prefer to go to groups that go against the norm to form their identity, religious culture, militaristic organization, group founded on hatred, and etc. They maybe withdraw their own psychotic fantasies. After all, being bad or being nobody is sheltered at not being knowing who you are. Virtue, if you successfully negotiate this stage, you will have the virtue Erikson called fidelity. Fidelity means loyalty, ability to live society standard despite their imperfections and incompleteness and inconsistency. We are not taking about blind loyalty and we are not taking about accepting the imperfection. After all, if you have common your community, you want to see it because the best it can be. But fidelity means that you have a place in the community, a place that will allow you to contribute.
Stage 6. Young adulthood, 20s to early 40s. Intimacy versus isolation. The sixth stage in Erikson's 8 stages of psychosocial development is the young adulthood. According to Erikson, after the person develops a sense of self in adolescence, he is now ready to share his life with others. Exploring relationship leading towards long-term commitments with someone other than a family member. Avoidance of intimacy or fear of commitment can often lead to isolation or loneliness. Success in this stage will lead to the virtue of love. Thus, in this stage as young adults, we slowly understand who we are and we start to let go of the relationship we had built earlier in order to fit in. We ask ourselves if we can love. If we can make a long-term commitment, we are confident and happy. If we cannot form intimate relationship, we might end up feeling isolated and lonely. Our friends and partners are now the center of our development. Stage 7, Middle Adulthood, 40s to mid-60s. Generativity versus stagnation. According to Erikson, when a person reaches the 40s, he enters in the stage known as middle adulthood, leaving their marks for generations that follow. Raising children, being productive at work, and becoming involved in community activities and organizations. Success leads to feelings of usefulness and accomplishments. Failures result in feeling stagnant, hollow, and unproductive. When we reach our 40s, we become comfortable, use our leisure time, creativity, and maybe begin contributing to the society. Our concern is generativity. If we think that we are able to lead the next generation into this world, we are happy. If we didn't resolve some conflicts earlier, we can become pessimistic and experience stagnation. People at home and at work are now who influences the most. Stage 8, Maturity, from mid-60s to end of life. Ego integrity versus despair. The last stage in Erikson's 8th stage of psychosocial development is known as the maturity stage. Evaluation of entire life. Integrity, look back with satisfaction and sense of accomplishment. Despair, review with anger, frustration, doesn't feel a sense of accomplishment, maybe have regrets. Basic strength, wisdom, detached concerned with the whole of life. As we grow older, we tend to slow down and begin to look back over our lives. We ask, how have I done? If we think we did well, we develop feelings of contentment and integrity. If not, we can experience despair and become grumpy and bitter.